If someone asked me when things started to change between us, I don't think I could give a straight answer. There wasn't a single moment. No big fight, no dramatic betrayal. It was gradual, subtle, like waking up one morning and realizing you don't recognize the shape of your own shadow. We used to be solid. Not perfect, but connected. I'd plan date nights, leave little notes for her to find. Stuff like good luck today, or you looked amazing this morning. Just small things to remind her that I saw her. I loved her. I always believed relationships needed maintenance. Like a house, you don't wait until the roof caves in to fix the leaks. You patch things up before they turn into damage. For a while, I thought I was doing the right thing. The loving husband thing, keeping us grounded while the world rushed around us. But somewhere along the way, she stopped showing up. Not physically, she was still in the house, still at the table, still climbing into bed beside me every night. But it wasn't her anymore. It was a version of her that had quietly put up walls I couldn't see through. At first, I gave her grace. Life gets busy. Stress adds weight. We all have those weeks where everything feels like too much. But weeks turned into months, and her reasons started sounding more like rehearsed excuses. I'm just tired. I've got a ton going on at work. I need time to recharge. I listened. I backed off when she needed space. I kept showing up because I thought that's what you do when someone you love is struggling. You don't give up. But the more I tried to reach her, the further she pulled away. She got lost in hobbies, one she never invited me into. Started spending hours on her phone, smiling at things I never got to see. And then came a nights out with friends. No longer a let's go together, but a casual, I'm heading out, don't wait up. And I didn't. I'd sit in the quiet, eating takeout with the TV on low, pretending not to feel the shift in the air around me. But I did. I felt it every time I heard her heels on the tile, every time she laughed at something on her phone instead of laughing with me. The house started feeling like an empty hotel, clean, quiet, but not home. I started noticing how our conversations changed too. No more random texts during the day. No more asking how my day was. No more us. Just small talk, mostly about bills or dinner or the kids' school stuff. It was like we were roommates who occasionally shared a meal. Functional, polite, distant. But still, I kept trying. I'd make dinner and light a candle. She'd blow it out and turn the lights on. I'd book a weekend getaway. She'd reschedule last minute because work was too crazy. I even suggested we unplug for an evening, just the two of us. She laughed, and said, "What are we, teenagers?" That one stuck with me, because once we had been, I held on to hope longer than I should have. I kept convincing myself that this was just a phase, that things would go back to normal. But every day that passed without effort from her felt like a silent confirmation. I was the only one still trying. Still, I didn't want to believe it. I kept pouring more into the relationship, thinking maybe this gesture would land. Maybe this time she'd notice. Maybe if I just held on a little longer, she'd come back. But what I didn't realize was that I had become the only one rowing, trying to steer a ship while she let the sails flap in the wind, indifferent to the direction we were drifting. It's a helpless feeling, loving someone who no longer meets you halfway. And I wasn't angry at her. Not really. I was tired. Tired of guessing what she was thinking. Tired of carrying conversations that went nowhere. Tired of walking on eggshells, trying not to make her more distant than she already was. There were nights I lay awake beside her, wondering if she even noticed the ache growing in me. If she cared that the man she married was becoming a stranger, not out of resentment, but out of necessity. Because how long can you keep offering parts of yourself when they keep going unnoticed? I was losing pieces of who I was trying to keep us whole. And that's when the questions started creeping in. The quiet ones you ask yourself in the mirror when no one's watching. What if this is just it now? What if she's already left in every way but physically? What if I'm the only one still fighting for something that doesn't exist anymore? I didn't have answers yet, but the fact that I was even asking told me everything I needed to know. Something had shifted, and maybe it wasn't just her. Maybe it was me too. I don't remember how the conversation started exactly. It was just another tired evening. I was washing dishes. She was scrolling through her phone at the table, the screen casting that familiar cold glow across her face. The silence between us wasn't new. It had been there for a while, but that night, it felt heavier. like it had mass, like it was pressing in on both of us. I said something quiet, almost too quiet to hear over the running faucet. You notice how we don't really talk anymore? She didn't even look up. Just let the question hang there for a second too long before replying, flatly, talk about what? I shut off the water and turned to face her. About us, I said. Anything, really. I try. I plan things, I check in, I want to feel connected. But lately, it feels like I'm the only one who's even trying. She finally looked up then. Not angry, not defensive, just tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that said she'd already made peace with a version of the relationship I hadn't even realized we were in. And then she said it. I don't need to do things just to make you happy. That's not what happiness is for me. She said it calmly. No edge in her voice. No intention to wound. Just facts, as if she'd been rehearsing them for a while. Something inside me shifted. Or maybe it broke. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't ask her to explain. I just stood there, a dish towel still in my hand, and let the truth settle in. She didn't see my effort as love. She saw it as pressure. And I realized I'd been speaking a language she no longer understood, or maybe one she'd stopped wanting to hear a long time ago. That night, I lay in bed next to her, wide awake. She turned her back to me, like she always did, and fell asleep within minutes. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, not angry, not sad, just quiet. My thoughts weren't racing like they usually did. No what-ifs, no desperate plans to fix things, just stillness. And in that stillness, I finally admitted it to myself. I'd been carrying this relationship alone. So the next morning, I made a decision. Not out of spite, not to prove a point. I just stopped. I got up early, made coffee, only for myself. I didn't ask if she wanted any. I didn't offer. I didn't linger in the kitchen waiting for small talk that never came. I got dressed, grabbed my bag, and left for work without saying more than a quiet bye. It was strange how easy it was to let go of the rituals I'd clung to for so long. I stopped texting her during the day, stopped planning date nights, stopped checking in to see how her day was going. I stopped trying to be noticed. And at first, she didn't notice at all. She seemed fine, maybe even relieved. The silence that had always made me feel anxious and desperate suddenly became the background noise of her normal. And that was the hardest part to accept. But I kept going, not to punish her, but to finally give myself a break from the exhausting cycle of one-sided effort. I started using my free time differently. I'd go for runs after work. I read more. I reconnected with things I used to love, but had pushed aside because I thought I needed to pour all my time into us. Without realizing it, I had been disappearing inside my own marriage, letting go of myself to hold on to something that wasn't even alive anymore. A few days in, she started noticing. One evening, as I walked in from a run, sweat still dripping off my brow, she looked up from the couch and said, "You've been quiet lately." I shrugged, grabbed a water bottle from the fridge. Just been keeping to myself. She waited, maybe expecting me to elaborate, but I didn't. And she didn't press. And that silence? It wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't angry. It was just different. Not hostile. Not passive-aggressive. Just two people occupying the same space with nothing left to say. The house felt different too. Not heavier. Lighter somehow. Because I wasn't holding up both ends anymore. I was just existing. Breathing. Living. I hadn't made some grand decision to leave. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. I was still wearing my ring. Still sharing the bed. Still doing the dishes. But something had shifted, and we both knew it. For once, I wasn't trying to fix it. For once, I wasn't chasing her down. And for once, she was the one noticing the silence. You know what's weird? Once I stopped trying, everything got eerily calm. Like a storm had passed, but instead of blue skies, it just left behind this still, gray quiet. No yelling, no fights, no dramatic breakdowns. Just the slow, creeping acknowledgement that we were no longer in our marriage. We were just around it. I kept showing up for the kids, for work, for the basic rhythms of daily life. But emotionally, I was somewhere else entirely. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even resentful anymore. I was just done. That's when she started noticing. Not all at once. Just little moments. She asked if I wanted to watch something together on a Friday night. Something we hadn't done in months. I told her I had some reading to catch up on, and she just nodded like she'd expected it. Like the version of me who once would have dropped everything to sit beside her was gone, and she was only just realizing it now. Another night, she paused in the hallway and said, "You've been really distant lately." I looked at her and replied, "I'm just following your lead." She didn't know what to say, just blinked, then walked off like my words had landed harder than she expected. And maybe they had, because I wasn't angry when I said it. I wasn't accusing her. I was simply telling the truth. The same truth she had handed me weeks earlier without even blinking. It wasn't long after that when the work trip came up. A conference out of town. 3 nights in a hotel, presentations, panels, the usual. Normally, I'd talk to her about it ahead of time, remind her of the dates, maybe even suggest she come along and we turn into a weekend. But this time, I barely mentioned it. I packed the night before and told her I'd be leaving early in the morning. She looked up from her phone and just said, "Okay, safe travels. No questions. No, I'll miss you. No, call me when you get there. Just okay." I left the next morning before the sun was up. And weirdly, as I drove away from our house, I didn't feel sadness or guilt. I felt lighter, like the air was clearer the farther I got. The first day of the trip was forgettable. Meetings, handshakes, awkward networking. The kind of stuff that drains you more than it energizes you. But the second night, at a group dinner, I ended up sitting next to a woman named Claire. She worked for a partner company, smart, warm, funny in that dry way that sneaks up on you. We talked for hours. Not flirtatious, not romantic, just real. She asked about my kids. I told her about Jake's soccer obsession and Emma's love of space documentaries. She told me about her divorce 2 years ago and how, in her words, you don't realize how numb you've become until someone looks you in the eye and actually listens. That line stayed with me, because that night I realized how long it had been since I felt seen. Claire didn't touch my hand. She didn't lean in or flirt. She just listened, and that, somehow, meant more than any kiss ever could have. For a few hours, I wasn't the invisible husband or the background character in someone else's life. I was a person again, present, alive. When the dinner ended and we all parted ways, she smiled and said, "You've got a good heart. I hope someone at home knows that." I didn't know how to respond. I went back to my hotel room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at a city I barely knew. And for the first time since everything started unraveling, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clear, not because I wanted someone new, but because I finally understood how empty things have become back home. When I returned a day later, she didn't ask how the trip went. Didn't even look up when I walked through the door. Just a simple, "Hey," from the kitchen. No, "How was it?" No, "Glad you're home." Just back to our regularly scheduled silence. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just that she didn't know me anymore. She didn't care to. That truth hit harder than I expected. Not in an explosive, heart-shattering way, but like a final click in a long line of subtle shifts. A door closing behind me, gently but firmly. I put my bag down, took off my coat, and stood there in the hallway for a minute. Just stood there, listening to her hum as she chopped vegetables. So normal, so casual, as if I hadn't just returned from a trip that showed me exactly how forgotten I'd become. And I realized then, whatever hope I had left, whatever part of me had been holding out for some kind of spark or sign, it was gone. That night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I saw her scrolling through her phone between bites of pasta. And I knew, we weren't just broken. We were done pretending we weren't. I didn't go into that night planning to confront her. Honestly, I didn't have the energy for another dead-end conversation. But something about sitting across from her while she scrolled through her phone, completely detached, stirred something in me. Maybe it was the contrast, the vivid memory of talking with Claire just days earlier, feeling seen, heard, compared to the indifference in my own home. After dinner, she got up without a word, plate still half full. She didn't ask how my trip was. Didn't ask if I was okay. She walked upstairs, and I just sat there, staring at the chair she left empty. My fork clinked against the plate when I set it down, and the sound echoed louder than it should have. That's when I knew. I couldn't keep living in this version of my life. I couldn't keep pretending this was normal, or fair, or survivable. So I followed her upstairs. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, still on her phone. I stood in the doorway for a second, then finally said, "Can we talk?" She looked up, startled. Sure. I mean, really talk, I clarified. She set her phone down slowly. Okay. I sat on the far side of the bed. Not close. Just enough to look her in the eye. I've been trying for a long time, I said. Trying to keep us together. Trying to make things feel even halfway connected. But I feel like I'm the only one who's been trying. She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me, like she didn't know whether to agree or argue. Then finally, she said, I didn't ask you to try that hard. That response landed like a punch I didn't see coming. Not because it was angry, but because it was honest. Brutally honest. No, I said quietly. You didn't. But I did it because I thought we were worth it. I know, she whispered, eyes dropping to her lap. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't feel what I was supposed to feel, and I didn't want to admit that. There it was, the unspoken truth between us. I felt like I was failing you, she continued, her voice smaller now. The more you tried, the worse I felt, like I couldn't keep up with your expectations. So I pulled away. It was easier. And in the meantime, I said I was here, trying to love someone who already left. She looked up then, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something real in her eyes. Not annoyance, not distance, just raw, uncertain sadness. I didn't know how to fix it, she said. I thought maybe if I waited long enough, things would go back to normal on their own. But they didn't, I said. She nodded. No, they didn't. We sat in silence for a while. Not the cold, heavy silence we'd grown used to. This was different. This was the kind of silence where things settle, where things finally come into focus. I met someone on the trip, I said, careful with every word. Nothing happened. Nothing physical. But she talked to me. She listened. And I realized how long it's been since someone did that. Her breath caught a little. Are you saying you want to be with her? No, I said. I don't want to be with anyone. I just want to stop feeling invisible. Another silence. She rubbed her hands together, like she was trying to warm them, or keep them steady. I don't want to lose you, she finally said. I believed her, but I also knew that wanting not to lose someone and being willing to show up for them are two different things. I don't want to be lost anymore, I replied. We talked for hours that night, about where things started to fall apart, about the expectations we never voiced, the resentment we buried, the exhaustion that grew between us like mold in the corners of a room no one bothered to clean. There was no dramatic resolution, no sudden hug, no guarantees. But for the first time in what felt like years, we had an honest conversation. It didn't fix anything, but acknowledged everything. We decided to try therapy, not to save the marriage in a last-ditch scramble, but to understand how we got here. We set some ground rules, space when needed, no more avoidance, and most of all, brutal honesty. No more pretending things were fine when they weren't. And we agreed on something else, that if we were going to try, it had to be as equals. No one doing all the work. No more walking on emotional eggshells. Just two people facing the damage head-on. She cried, quietly, not with drama, not with panic. Just tears, simple, tired tears. I sat beside her, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to fix it. I just let her feel it. That night, we didn't hold each other in bed. But we didn't turn our backs, either. We lay there, both staring at the ceiling, a few inches apart, close enough to feel each other breathe. And in that silence, something shifted again. Not back to what we were, but maybe towards something new. We didn't wake up the next morning magically healed. There wasn't a warm embrace or a whispered apology that changed everything. In fact, we barely spoke as we got ready. But it wasn't tense. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a long storm. Not peace exactly, but a pause. The next few days were awkward. We were still us, but different. More cautious. Less reactive. She didn't walk past me with that far-off look anymore. And I didn't rush to fill the silence. We gave each other space, but this time it wasn't avoidance. It was intentional. Respectful. We scheduled our first therapy session a week later. We both showed up on time, sat next to each other, but didn't hold hands. The therapist asked why we were there, and I went first. I told her we'd stopped seeing each other, that we'd been living in the same house, going through the motions, but emotionally checked out for a long time. I said I didn't know if we could fix it, but I didn't want to keep pretending either. Catherine nodded. She added her own version of the truth. that she had been shutting down out of fear. That every time I tried to pull us closer, it only reminded her of how far away she'd drifted. And instead of dealing with that guilt, she hid inside herself, pushed me away to avoid facing how much damage had already been done. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was honest. Over the next few weeks, we kept going. Some sessions were productive. Some were painful. Some felt like nothing at all. But we showed up. For the first time in years, we were facing the hard things together. At home, small changes started happening. She started asking how my day was, really asking, not just out of habit. I stopped trying to impress her or win her back and just talked to her. We ate dinner at the table without our phones. Sometimes the kids joined. Sometimes it was just us. We had our first real laugh during a grocery run, of all places. She made a dumb joke about the off-brand cereal I always bought, and I rolled my eyes. But then I smiled. A real smile. Not forced, not polite. And she smiled back. It was like a crack of light through a long, dark tunnel. Another night, we were making pasta, nothing fancy. She was chopping garlic, and I was stirring the sauce. We were just there, together, not trying too hard, not analyzing every word. And out of nowhere, she laughed. A full, unexpected, genuine laugh. It caught me off guard. I hadn't heard that sound in so long. I almost didn't recognize it. "What?" I asked, smiling even though I didn't know why. "Nothing," she said. "It just feels nice. This feels nice." And it did. Not magical, not movie scene romantic, but real. Later that night, I sat out on the porch after everyone had gone to bed. Guitar in my lap, drink in hand. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was alone in the world. I didn't feel like I was holding onto a sinking ship. Were we fixed? No. Were we better? Yeah, a little. It was slow. There were setbacks. A couple of arguments that made me wonder if we were just delaying the inevitable. But the difference now was that we didn't shut down afterward. We talked. We admitted when something hurt. We apologized without defensiveness. We gave each other room to grow. And I started showing up for myself, too. I ran again. Played guitar. Went out with friends. I stopped trying to be the perfect husband and just worked on being a whole person. Someone with boundaries, with needs, with a voice. She did too. Picked her hobbies back up. Took long walks alone. Started journaling. Read books about vulnerability. We shared some of what we learned with each other. Not to teach, but to connect. And over time, the house started to feel like a home again. Not the same one we had before, but a different kind. One built on honesty. Imperfect, but stronger. I don't know what the future holds. I don't think either of us pretends to know. But we're here. We're trying. Together. And that's more than I ever thought we'd get back.